Welcome to A News. I'm Umar Tasleem, and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. Today, we're following a very tense and uncertain moment as the U.S.-Iran conflict hangs in the balance with the ceasefire about to expire and real fears that things could escalate quickly if talks fall apart. There's still diplomatic efforts underway with Pakistan stepping in to host negotiations. But at the same time, tensions in the Strait of Hormuz are rising with the ongoing U.S. Navy's blockade. In the region, Israel's conflict with the Hezbollah is continuing to take lives even as both sides explore the possibility of renewed talks with Lebanon. And in Gaza, the scale of the destruction is becoming impossible to ignore, with tens of thousands killed, over 2 million displaced, and more than $71 billion needed just to begin rebuilding. I'll be discussing all these latest developments today with Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik, and a very special guest here in our studios, Dr. Mustafa Caner from the Middle East Institute at Sakarya University. Let's begin.
The Iranian-flagged container ship Tusca, which was boarded and seized by U.S. forces on Sunday, is likely to have what Washington deems dual-use items that could be used by Tehran's military. That's according to maritime security sources on Monday. The small container ship is part of the Islamic Republic of Iran shipping lines group, which has been hit with U.S. sanctions. The U.S. Central Command said Tusca's crew failed to comply with repeated warnings over a 6-hour period, and that the vessel was in violation of a U.S. blockade. The security sources, who declined to be identified, said their initial assessments were the vessel was likely to be carrying dual-use items after a voyage from Asia. U.S. Central Command has listed metals, pipes, and electronic components, among other goods that could have a military as well as an industrial use and could be captured. One of the sources said Tusca had previously transported items deemed as dual use. They did not go into detail. Iran's foreign ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Iran's military said the ship had been traveling from China and accused the U.S. of armed piracy, according to state media on Monday. U.S. President Donald Trump said in a post on Truth Social on Sunday that the Tusca was under U.S. sanctions due to its prior history of illegal activity. Iran is considering attending peace talks with the United States in Pakistan, a senior Iranian official told Reuters on Monday, following moves by Islamabad to end the U.S. blockade of Iran's ports. However, the official stressed that no decision had been made, and Iran's foreign minister said that continued violations of the ceasefire by the U.S. are a major obstacle to continuing the diplomatic process.
Welcome back to the program. Dr. Mehmet Çelik and Dr. Mustafa Caner, gentlemen, welcome to Turkey's Diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Mustafa, I'll begin with you. Now, today there are talks scheduled in Pakistan, but we don't know if they're going to take place. Yeah. The United States says there's a delegation in Pakistan. We've been seeing different type of messages from the Iranians. The parliament speaker says we won't enter into these negotiations because the United States is threatening us. Yeah. What can we expect today? Do you think these talks will go ahead? Will the Iranian team be in Pakistan? What are you expecting?
Actually, we can expect any outcome, any decision by the Iranian authorities in the coming hours. The ceasefire will expire Wednesday, tomorrow. So there are not really much time to decide whether to extend the duration of the ceasefire or reach an agreement with the United States, or the sides, whether they will go back to war again. Of course, the expiration of ceasefire doesn't necessarily mean that immediately the warring sides will return to war. But still, Iranian side here is playing hardball because they have some demands from the United States, like they demand Trump to lift this blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. Actually, Iran positioned itself with these demands, and these demands are preconditions for entering the negotiations for Iran. Like, if Donald Trump doesn't lift this blockade, Iran says they're not gonna, engage in talks with the United States. Or, another, red lines by Iranian authorities not to be crossed according to them, like they don't want the United States raise demands like zero enrichment or, handing over the highly enriched uranium from Iran to the United States. So these demands are not welcomed by Iranian authorities, and they made it clear beforehand. And if the United States won't abide by these demands, then Iran says we are out of this, negotiation. So it's a tense situation, a precarious ground here, very shaky, and the ceasefire is really fragile, especially after the United States seized an Iranian vessel, in the Strait of Hormuz. I think it was 2 days ago. So this marked a really major escalation, and IRGC pledged to retaliate against this move. And considering the fact that IRGC is now clearly the power broker in Iran, so we can expect any escalation. But at the same time, Iran also does know that they cannot, be engaged in this war forever. Iran's resources are limited. Its infrastructure severely, got damaged, and they have little appetite to, return to war, because I think both sides are, some kind of, they have some kind of war fatigue. So that's why they don't want to go to war again, but still they have, some level of, demands at some particular level. They want to impose their, own terms of conditions on the other side.
Mehmet, let's say you were part of the Pakistani delegation. How would you try to bring Iran and United States together? I know there are some things which are non-negotiable, uranium enrichment, nuclear weapons. How would you try to bring the sides together? What should be done to resolve those differences at this point?
I mean, that's a very good question. It depends on how much leverage does Pakistani side have on either side. But I think the fact that they have been able to use that close relationship with the Iranian side as well as the US and facilitate this platform in itself is a very good success on Pakistani side, because prior to that, I mean, there had been efforts by other regional countries, but they were unsuccessful, unfortunately, for one reason or another, be it the Iranian side not wanting to at least set up a table elsewhere, or the fact that the ties weren't as strong as Pakistan's, for example. But I think the leverage Pakistan has on either side has been able to facilitate the first round. The second round is already at works. Whether the sides will overcome these differences prior to the talks is one thing, but I think if the sides get together even without agreeing on lifting off, let's say, the Strait of Hormuz or the blockade on Strait of Hormuz or other agreement, it will help at least form a platform for them to be able to move and take, even though these steps may be baby steps, like very little steps, the fact that I think they're coming together in itself is a very good positive result without expecting any tangible, I mean, we didn't expect the tangible results from the first round. I think the second round in itself is very early to expect any especially when it comes to the nuclear program, when it comes to sanctions, when it comes to Lebanon ceasefires, when it comes to, security guarantees, or even when it comes to the U.S. side paying for the Iranian damages as Tehran has demanded it. But what we should expect from the second round of talk is some sort of negotiation platform where the sides can test one another to see how much room there is for flexibility, because right now neither side has that flexibility. Both sides have maximalist demands from the opposite side, and without that platform, they cannot come even they cannot come together and to discuss over the disagreements, even though they are indirect talks. Perhaps if the table is set up and the sides are able to come to Islamabad at the same time, maybe that will lead to the most, I think, positive outcome would for them to be directly negotiating with one another. That would be perhaps the most realistic outcome. Otherwise, Pakistan cannot convince Iran to eliminate all of its nuclear program and hand over the 400 plus kilo of enriched uranium to the United States. Similarly, the Pakistani side cannot convince Tehran to, get rid of the proxies or stop its ballistic missile program. What the Pakistani side, led by Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, is that convincing them to come to Islamabad is, I think, how much, the level of leverage that can be used and applied as some sort of soft diplomacy pressure would be for them to actually come to Islamabad.
Mustafa, you said earlier that the IRGC, it seems like the IRGC is in control of what's happening in Iran. Do you think that there are differences between the Iranian government and the IRGC? How does that pan out? What are the problems there?
Naturally, there are some differences, minor differences, I would say, not major differences, because during war times, you cannot have, really essential, beef with one another, because you have to be united, you have to, present a powerful posture against, the enemy and, outside world. So I believe there are, disagreements, there are divisions, even I think there are divisions inside the IRGC. There are, different power centers led by different actors who have different ideologies or different way of doing, negotiation or conducting, foreign policy. Such as, one power center could insist on, showing a really, not conciliatory position against other side, not, not giving any concession, not, being flexible a bit. So because they think that previous retaliatory actions after killing of, Khamenei or Soleimani or, Nasrallah, didn't provide a sufficient deterrence with Iran against the, United States and Israel. So that's why they think that Iran has to present a really rigid, powerful position and, shouldn't, be in a conciliatory mode. So this is one way of, doing negotiations according to one power center, but another power center, which, I think is represented by the foreign ministry and more pragmatic figures, they think that, for example, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and other figures, they think that they have to be a little bit, flexible, because this is the nature of negotiations. You give a little bit, you take a little bit, something like that. So they, defend a position that Tehran should be a little bit flexible. For example, let's take the Speaker of the Parliament, Mr. Ghalibaf. Ghalibaf said that, yes, Iran actually demonstrated a really, powerful resilience against the enemy, quote unquote, but the enemy is not still defeated. So that means that Iran has to engage in diplomatic talks. So there are various positions, but I think the very idea that was, is shared by all these, power centers is that Iran cannot, fight forever. So today or tomorrow, in a way or another, Iran has to be engaged in diplomatic talks. But the method maybe differs.
Mehmet, now there are some reports now. They're saying that J.D. Vance is expected to land in Islamabad tomorrow. Mehmet, tell me about this. How much difference does it make? Let's say Trump was coming to Pakistan. Would that have made a difference? Would Trump have walked away with a deal? Does that make a lot of difference because there were reports as well before that Vance would not be in Pakistan. And so that would leave the job to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. How much influence can these leaders like the vice president or the president make? Do you think that they would be able to close this deal now?
Well, I think in diplomacy, there is a big difference on who is conducting diplomacy for any given country, because there's symbolism behind it. There's also expectation when there is a leader at the top level attending the talks. There is prestige involved in that. There is, whether you compromise or you get the other side to make bigger concessions, it draws a different picture. If the United States is actually attending these talks at the very top level by Donald Trump attending the talks, he needs to walk away from that table with one, a victory, two, a victory that will be recorded under Donald Trump's name as the 11th, perhaps, deal that he made internationally that ended a war, and this is how he would portray it. But if this is going to be J.D. Vance attending, the United States still giving room for these talks to move to the third round without any tangible achievements from the second. But if the meeting is being held at a leader-to-leader level, then if Donald Trump is there, who's going to be the counterpart? I think this is a bigger question on the Iranian side. Right now we don't have that figure. Is it Pezeshkian? Is it Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei? Is it somebody from IRGC? How Iranian side will decide on that will also, I think, be a very strong determinant factor on Donald Trump attending to this meeting or not. Or whether there will be, let's say, Pezeshkian and some of the regional countries forming some sort of a platform where Donald Trump will say, I am establishing another peace in the Middle East, as in a board of peace in Gaza or what they signed at Sharm el-Sheikh. So I think Donald Trump's attendance is very unlikely at the moment because there is no table even set up right now. The Iranian side is rejecting. J.D. Vance may perhaps land in Islamabad and attend these talks indirectly with the Iranian side representatives. But for Donald Trump to attend, he needs to have, we should expect a very strong deal to be made, also a very strong ceasefire that will have very strong regional implications. Otherwise, he's not going to land in the Middle East unless he's walking away with a very strong deal that he can also promote at home for his domestic audiences.
Mehmet, thank you for those comments. U.S. gasoline prices may stay above $3 a gallon into next year as officials cite war-linked energy pressures and an uncertain outlook.
U.S. gasoline prices could remain above $3 a gallon until 2027. That's according to U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright. On Sunday, Wright told CNN he believed gas prices had peaked, but may not fall below the $3 level until next year. Gas prices have risen since the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran, and Iran retaliated against nearby countries. The rising energy costs added to political headwinds for President Donald Trump ahead of the November midterm elections. Trump's Republican Party will defend slim majorities in the Senate and House of Representatives.
This is an administration that decided on a war of choice in Iran and driving up these costs. I don't know if anybody thought about the consequences.
At a hearing last week, Democratic lawmakers excoriated Wright and the Trump administration for rising gas prices.
This president and cabinet made calculated choices to inflict this high-cost chaos on Americans.
So when are we really going to get $3 a gallon gas?
Well, I think that's going to be up to how the negotiations go.
Trump administration officials have offered differing views on how gas prices may shift. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent last week predicted gas prices would fall to the $3 per gallon range this summer.
So we will see, and I'm optimistic that during the summer we will see gas with a 3 in front of it sooner rather than later.
Trump himself has said that gas prices may remain elevated until November. The average price for a gallon of regular gas on Sunday was $4.05, according to an estimate by the AAA, compared to $3.16 a year ago.
The body of a French peacekeeper killed in southern Lebanon was repatriated to France on Sunday. The UN peacekeeping force came under an attack with small arms fire on Saturday morning, leaving 1 dead and 3 others wounded.
UNIFIL peacekeepers paid tribute to a French soldier killed in Lebanon during a ceremony held at Beirut International Airport before his body was repatriated to France.
We are here for you today. We are here to stand before you and to honor you. As your commander, I speak to you with respect and with a heavy heart. While serving under the United Nations flag, you fell here in this country, in the south of Lebanon. Honor again to you, my soldier.
The French soldier was killed and 3 others wounded while clearing a road in southern Lebanon in an attack that UNIFIL peacekeepers and French officials said on Saturday was likely carried out by Hezbollah. Hezbollah denied any involvement in the attack, expressing its surprise at positions that rushed to make baseless accusations against the group. In calls with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, French President Emmanuel Macron condemned the unacceptable attack, Macron's office said in a statement. 3 other members of the United Nations UNIFIL peacekeeping mission were injured. UNIFIL said initial assessments indicated the fire came from non-state actors, allegedly Hezbollah, and that an investigation had been launched into what it called a deliberate attack. Macron also said the evidence so far pointed to the Iran-backed armed group and urged Lebanese authorities to act against those responsible. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres also condemned the attack in Lebanon and urged all parties to respect the cessation of hostilities and the ceasefire. UNIFIL was first deployed in 1978 and has remained through successive conflicts, including a 2024 war during which its positions came under repeated fire.
Welcome back to the program. Dr. Mustafa, we cannot ignore what's happening in Lebanon right now.
Of course, yeah.
It's a similar situation. There is another yellow line in Lebanon as well. Israeli forces are still there in the so-called buffer zone. What can we expect from what's going on in Lebanon? There's another meeting tomorrow as well in the United States between Israel and Lebanon. Can we see something coming from that meeting? Do you think there would be positive developments, or are we still going to see the same statements again and again?
I think the picture is really stark when it comes to Lebanon, and the situation is really tense because there are various actors. Lebanese government, we have count, and also Hezbollah, another domestic force in Lebanon, which has serious capacity in terms of military and political and also social, because it has a solid social base in Lebanon. So we cannot also ignore or, think to exclude Hezbollah from any possible deal in Lebanon. So we know that Lebanese government is under heavy pressure from the United States and Israel about, regarding disarming Hezbollah. So they are pressing the Lebanese government, but Lebanese government has actually not many tools to do that. So they are under pressure. Hezbollah, on the other side, is preserving its position that they're not going to be disarmed, because if it happens, then there will be no force, no, political entity, political and military entity to resist against Israel. So And also, I think we should connect the Lebanese front to Iranian front, because Lebanon has always been considered as part of the wider strategic Iranian front. Iran considers Hezbollah as part of itself, at least ideologically. Maybe after the fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, there is now a disconnection, between Iran and Lebanon in terms of, geography. However, Hezbollah still depends on Iranian help, and let's not also forget that Hezbollah joined the war because of Iran. I mean, so Iran cannot abandon Hezbollah so easily. That's why they insisted that Lebanon also should be part of the ceasefire, originally, and Pakistan also shared the same position against the United States and Israel. So, because if Iran loses Hezbollah, then it means that Iran loses its footprint across the region. So that means that its influence around the region will be degraded. So I think that's why Iran is insisting that Lebanon should be part of any deal, because without this, the regional peace or stability will remain impossible according to Iran. So that's why Iran is also pressing from other side. I think it's like a puzzle.
Mehmet, tell me about Turkey's position right now, because we've been seeing Hakan Fidan, Turkish President Erdogan, they've been engaged in negotiations with their counterparts. And this message has been reiterated that Israel is the biggest obstruction to peace in this region. Mehmet, if you look at the developments from Iran to Lebanon to Gaza, what should Turkey be doing right now? Of course, it's involved in those negotiations, but what more can Turkey offer?
Well, I think Turkey is doing all it can within its own material capability and diplomatic leverage over the other side, be in involvement in the talks in Islamabad indirectly, or trying to talk to the U.S. side and to Iranian side indirectly, be it involvement in the Middle East in general through humanitarian interference in Gaza, for example, or to Syria's reconstruction and post-conflict state building. We need to look at Turkey's involvement not only through one incident or one case, but how it has approached the region as a whole picture. When Turkey looks at the picture, there is a source of problem, and then there is the symptoms of that. The source of the problem for Turkey, for Turkish officials in our region, is Israel. When we look at Gaza, it's Israel. When we look at Lebanon, it's Israel. When we look at southern Syria and the developments there, it's Israel. When we look at Iran, it's Israel. When we look at the region when we look at even the talks between Hamas and the Israeli side, when they were taking place and Israel attacked the Gulf states, that was seen as a source of the problem, as you're trying to damage the negotiation table. So for Turkey, for Mr. Erdogan, for Mr. Fidan, the picture has one problem in it, and that is Israel. In addition to all this, Israeli side has chosen Turkey as a new target, a new enemy in rhetoric right now. In addition to that, as Mr. Fidan said during the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, after a question was asked by a Greek journalist, he said, when we look at that alliance between the Greek Cypriots, the Greece side in Athens, and also Israeli side, when they're standing beside one another and they're forming a military alliance, they have one target or one enemy or one actor that they see as a full-blown rival, and that is Turkey. So when we look at the source of instability, we see that Israel is behind every single action that contributes to that instability. But when we look at Turkish side, Turkey's involvement is not necessarily that interference that only protects the interests of Turkish citizens. Turkish interference is so that the people of the region, be it Turks, Kurds, Arabs, or the Iranians or Persians, the people of the region can put away some of the differences and find a common denominator where they can gather around, and that common denominator can contribute to everyone's stability, security, and prosperity. For that to be established, I think security must be established. Source of insecurity, source of destabilization, be it PKK terrorism, be it Daesh, be it Israeli policy of expansionism, must be tackled. Turkey interferes into different conflicts, not only in our region, but beyond also, through that approach that wants to protect everyone's interest, wants to secure everyone's borders, wants to secure everyone's future and prosperity. When we look at how Turkey is involved in Iran, of course, we have had many disagreements over the years when it comes to Turkey-Iran relationship. One of the most clear examples of this is Syria. Mm-hmm. In Syria, we were on the opposite side. Yeah. But still, when it was Iran's nuclear negotiations, since 2011, Turkey has sided with the Iranian side to push forward for some diplomatic negotiation, because Turkey believes that instability in Iran will affect its own stability directly or indirectly. Sure. Turkey believes that instability in Iraq through PKK terrorism or through some political instability between Baghdad and other actors contributes directly its economy or its security along Turkey-Iraq border. The instability in Syria affected Turkey for over a decade at many different levels, economically, socially, politically. In terms of security, Turkey paid a high price due to insecurity or the instability in Syria. So now, when Turkey is trying to, help Syria reconstruct itself, try to at least positively contribute to political stability in Iraq, Turkey wants to bring diplomacy as a solution to the disagreements between the West and Iran. At a time where Turkey is contributing, all this, Israel comes out as an actor that seeks instability as a policy for its own interests, for its own territorial expansionism, for its own, quote unquote, as they say, security, which brings everything but security for Israelis. I think what Turkey is trying to do at many different levels is also seen by the international community. By the United States, it is very acknowledged by Donald Trump administration. The Gulf countries now acknowledge that Turkey's engagement at different conflicts as a very influential actor can perhaps benefit the region. And this is why there is this pact between Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey that is trying to be established right now, because region has a lot of problems. We acknowledge that, but the regional problems can only find solution through regional proposals without, interference of the third parties. And this is what Turkey is trying to establish diplomatically through political engagement with different actors, and also, when it needs it, through hard power. And this is why Turkey, for example, conducted cross-border operations into Syria to protect Syria's territorial integrity.
Mehmet, I'll take you guys through some breaking news. Sources are saying that Iran's parliament speaker and foreign minister are still in Iran. And there's another story that I was looking at. Spain, Slovenia, and Ireland are now putting pressure on the European Union to suspend the association treaty with Israel. Mustafa, I want to ask you, in today's world, how important is diplomacy? Mehmet just explained brilliantly what Turkey is doing right now in this region and across the globe as well. You were at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Some people are saying that diplomacy is not working. We're seeing American actions as well. Destroy the infrastructure, kill people, kill military leaders, kill the supreme leader as well in Iran. Is diplomacy working today? Or are we only seeing these coercive measures? You know, I'm going to bomb you, and then I'm going to declare victory. How important is diplomacy, and what were the key takeaways from the Antalya Diplomacy Forum?
Diplomacy should work. I mean, that's the only tool that can bring us solutions that are sustainable and, you know, real solutions I'm talking about here. Because military tools or military solutions are only for, convincing the other side to, make them a little bit, closer to your own position, but it has limitations. One way or another, after the military tools, are exhausted, you have to be with the other part in a diplomatic process. So the United States cannot bomb Iran forever. That's not, a way of, conducting foreign policy or doing business. So there has to be, some limitations. And we know that only the political solutions are working around the world, not only in our, geography, in our region, in our, imminent environment, but also around the world. The only tool that works, brings sustainable solutions. This is, political engagement, political solutions, aka diplomacy. So I think that's why in a world that we are living in currently, that, the international law is shattering, there is no normativity that, actors could refer to and recalibrate or orient their position to. So if there is no normativity, if there is no, international law or any kind of, bounding values, that means we are in a situation that only the power speaks, only, raw force speaks, but it, can't take us anywhere, peaceful or anywhere with, stability, prosperity position. So it's like a state of nature that, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke once they described. So there is no law, there is no normativity, there are no values, bounding people, limiting their actions, aggressivity, or, their animosity towards each other. So there should be constraints, there should be limitations, and these limitations should be determined by diplomatic talks. That's why I think forums like Antalya Diplomacy Forum or any other, initiatives that are seeking to promote diplomacy, promote, talks, peaceful solutions are, at utmost importance. And Antalya Diplomacy Forum has been so successful in promoting those values and solutions. I think it's kind of a platform that brings diplomats, experts or academics, and even students together. Because students, for students also, this is an important opportunity, to interact with diplomats, to see the diplomacy in action there, because diplomacy was indeed in action there. So statesmen met with each other. So it was a great opportunity to, bring about opportunity for peace, for, stability, because we have no other option. The only option that works is diplomacy.
We're in the final few minutes. Mehmet, we're always talking about Gaza. I want to give you guys an update as well. The European Union and United Nations have released a report, Gaza Rapid Damage and Needs Assessment, and that says that the total reconstruction needed for Gaza could take around 10 years, and the cost would be $71 billion. nearly all schools have been destroyed, residences, hospitals. There's basically nothing in Gaza at this point while we're talking. 2.3 million people have been displaced. That's the entire population of the occupied Gaza Strip. Mehmet, some final comments on what's happening right now in Gaza?
Well, I think the bleeding wound that everyone watched in Gaza is still needs that immediate treatment, and that is to stop Israeli aggression towards Palestinians in the occupied territories as a whole, not just in Gaza, not just in West Bank, but in East Jerusalem as well. The occupation must stop. The killing must stop. The ceasefire must be working fully. And then after that, or as this is happening, the most basic humanitarian needs of the Palestinians must be provided. Unrestricted access to humanitarian aid must be happening. Unrestricted medical aid must be delivered to Palestinians. The reconstruction can only take place if there is an actual ceasefire. I mean, 26.3 billion is needed in the first 18 months for that immediate, immediate clearing of the basic infrastructure can take place. This is a huge amount. Who will provide for this destruction? I mean, it is one thing to point to different countries, but those who actually are responsible from this, will they ever be held accountable? Yeah. This is, I think, a big question. We can talk about statistics, how many people died, how much it will take to rebuild, how much money is needed. But if the occupation is still there, it will continue to destroy. If that destruction is not stopped, then there's no point of rebuilding.
Dr. Mehmet Çelik, thank you so much for that analysis. It was a pleasure having you in the studio. And Dr. Mustafa, thank you for being with us on Turkey's Diplomacy.
Thank you very much.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.